campus. Bam. So starting over, we have exciting news. We haven't picked official dates yet for these. And we've like mentioned this a couple of times, but it's like official now. We're going to be meeting biannually and some in-person like mastermind meetup setup. So not only are we doing all the virtual stuff that we're doing now on Mondays and Thursdays, and you guys have the one-on-one and everything else that we have going on, we're actually going to be setting something up for both Q4 and Q2 so that we can begin some kind of cadence of meeting in person at least twice a year. And our in-person meetings will either be a 2 or 3 day event. It's not going to be like a ticket that you have to pay for or anything, but you will have to cover your own airfare or travel and hotel expense. And then we'll pay for food and everything that we're going to be doing, whether we determine that to be in some kind of like conference room or however we decide to structure it, whether it's super intimate or if like everyone decides to join, we'll figure that out. But we're in the beginning phases of planning it, and it's official that we're officially, love officials, that we're going to be doing that. So I want everyone to get excited, and I think October-ish is the time frame we're shooting for our Q4 get together. And then I have no idea when for Q2. We haven't planned that far ahead, but we're planning something so that we can all actually meet in person. Because I don't know about y'all, but there's like pretty much everyone in here. Let's see, have I met any of you in person other than Matt and Reggie? I don't think so. So it'd be nice for us all to actually get together in person. There's a handful of things that we'll be doing there. It'll be very like there'll be some networking and knowledge and everything that we're going to be covering, but then there'll also be probably something fun or something that we'll go out and do on the town. We actually did toy around with the idea of our first meeting in October being that you guys come down to Mobile. We can actually walk some of the properties that we own and talk more specifics about what that looks like. We thought that'd be fun. But anyway, toying around some ideas, but that's the plan is in-person meetups. So nice. Everyone get excited. We'll pick a date here shortly, probably this week. Send it out to everybody so you can go ahead and get it on your calendar, book your travel dates, and get it popping. If that's a word. Is that a word anyone use? This I used to use it. Popping.
Coin it, trademark it.
I see some people like celebrating with emojis, but everyone's just dead silent in the room. I don't know how many people actually heard that.
Hey, question.
What?
How do y'all feel about sending out like a poll for different dates that might work for different amounts of people? I feel like we might get more engagement because I mean I for one need to ask off well in advance to take a few days off.
It'll probably end up being a weekend thing. I mean, yeah, definitely still probably gonna need to do that, but we'll probably end up making it like a Friday, Saturday,
Okay.
Sunday, or a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or something of that sort. But I can actually do a poll in this mastermind. So if I'm just looking at October dates, so let's say people want to do October. Giving you like options, not what options. Let's see, the first dates in October would be do you guys like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday better? Some of you actually live
Ask them in the poll.
Yeah, we'll get a poll. I think just sourcing the data and we'll try to get the max participation as possible, knowing that not everyone's going to be able to join. Like you said, the goal is to be biannual as much as we can. So like we're thinking Q4 and Q2 going into it. And if it ends up being a super value add for you guys and we want to do it more often, then we're 100% on board for that. But to not under promise, to not under deliver, we don't want to commit to a quarterly right now, but we think biannually is going to be pretty good for you guys. Again, we're not trying to make an event where you're paying hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars to attend. This is something that's just going to be part of your membership. And really more of an intimate affair where everyone comes with, what they're struggling with, some successes they had, something to offer the group as far as a value, and something that, that you're seeking while you're there. So that's kind of the intent, is to be more of a pure mastermind where we're all engaging rather than kind of a one-way conversation. So we'll definitely pull the crowd, and we'll try to get as much data as we can to get the max participation in Q4 of this year.
All right, I'm almost finished here. And then I'm gonna send it out for everyone to respond to. Literally just every weekend in October, which one works better for everybody.
I already have 2 other events that I'm going to in October, so that's going to be a big factor as well.
Unless we just don't want Matt to be there, No, I'm just kidding.
That's true. Who wants to hang out with me? Blah.
All right, I'm gonna try to send this out. I've never done a poll in Zoom before, so we're doing this together. Let me know if anyone just saw the poll pop up.
Made to send it out in like Survey Monkey, Josh.
Yeah, I think a survey is going to be best. I mean, I like how you're trying to get real-time feedback, but I think sending it out to everyone is probably best.
We did get 3 responses.
All right, let's see. I'll fill it out now.
4 of 25. Yeah. I'll just try to enjoy my cold dinner.
In my pho over here.
Oh man, that sounds good.
I know.
What are you eating?
Pho?
Ignorant, apparently. I have no idea what that is.
The Vietnamese soup.
No, it's so good. All right, Josh, I'm ready, buddy. We can get rolling now.
All right, only 11 people responded, but it looks like October 20th is winning.
Cool.
I don't know if you're busy that day, but anyway, I'll give you the opportunity to share your screen.
All right. I got caught up with crap today, but let me just get this up in the first slide. So I say caught up with crap, meaning I was not able to incorporate any of your beautiful faces into AI this week, but I will when I get some free time next time. So beginner series, as we continue here, guys, in the surface level, like Josh alluded to, we are still in section 7. This is gonna be our last week, and hopefully next week we'll wrap it up with some sort of end of series, stand up, role play, quiz, some sort of interactive thing. We'll see. Still, that's our goal this week, is to finalize what we're gonna do there. But next week should wrap up this beginning series flow. So with that in mind, think next week for any other additional series you think you guys would like us to focus on. So if there's anything specific that you would like us to kind of deep dive in, I know in the Thursday advanced series where we're going more into underwriting and analysis, and we have some cool kind of updates on that deal as we're actively showing you a deal we're underwriting and making offers on right now. And we'll get into that on Thursday. But for this beginner series, if there's any other topics you think, or any even topics within what we've covered in this series that you think, hey, this deserves a 3, 4, 5, 10-week series, let us know. We're trying to build this around what you guys want. All right. What we did, we started with around 70-ish questions that we were kind of mashing together, and I ended up expanding it to a nice round number of 100 common questions that you're going to get from investors. Now, this is 100 questions that we're trying to cover in 60 minutes. So with that being said, a lot of these are going to be obvious answers, right? So I'm going to preface a lot of this with a lot of this we've covered, but I wanted to have it like a comprehensive list that you can kind of go to. And I think this list is going to be great for you to kind of reference when you're considering maybe a pitch deck and you're about to pitch to investors and you're like, all right, what am I missing? Kind of just maybe what in the Air Force we call it finger dragging, like taking your finger and dragging it down these list of questions. Like, okay, oh crap, I didn't consider this, or hey, here's a question, how would I answer that? So it's going to be good for you to think about different ways you might consider answering these different questions. So we're not planning on going an in-depth, detailed answer on each of these. Again, this is more thought-provoking. And then what I'd like to do is just kind of write down which ones stuck out to you. And if you want to like go and expand further on how you might think about answering these, we're happy to dive more in the weeds at the end of the lesson. So again, superficial kind of quick answers that we'll kind of spout off going here, but then at the end we'll jump more into it. All right, so I broke this down into 6 different sections. the first section that we broke it down into is team structures and capabilities. Because again, most of the times when you're thinking about investments and you're talking to investors, they're often investing in you and your team and your capabilities versus the actual investment. You know, you might have a killer deal, but if you don't know how to operate a killer deal, you're going to have a killer bad day, right? You're going to have a bad investment for people. So, and you might take an investment that doesn't have the best margins, but if you're an efficient operator, you could really make it work. So your capabilities, and that's why this is really that are going to hit home first when you start dealing with the questions. So the first common question we get is, how are roles and responsibilities distributed among the team, and who's responsible for each role and responsibility? Josh, Reggie, and I recently had a meeting with an investor, and that's one of the things he asked us. What exactly do you do, Reggie? What exactly do you do, Josh? Hey, Matt, do you actually help in this group, or is it just Josh doing all the work? They'll ask these questions. And so just be prepared. And one of the things to realize with this is part of your role when you're defining your team and you're defining your general partnership, whether it's you individually running the entire show, or if it's just two of you, or you're bringing on another syndication group, this will force you to be clear and understand whose roles and responsibilities and how that's going to flow. Next question you're definitely going to get if you're talking to a savvy investor is who provides the loan guarantee? Who's the KP in this deal, and what's their mix? How long have the team members been working together? It's great. Like in a lot of industries, longevity means something in real estate. It's great that you slap a team together, put a pretty banner on it, but the longer you've been in business together as a partnership, specifically as the team that's going to be operating the deal, the better you're going to look. Now, you can leverage the longevity of others, which we have as well. One of the times we were trying to get agency debt, we leveraged the partners that we brought into the deal intentionally. So we brought experienced partners into the deal to kind of leverage their longevity. So that was one of the questions we were preemptively trying to take care of there. Next question: do all team members collaborate on every deal, or does the team composition vary from deal to deal? This is a question again you're going to get. So if Three Beach Capital, me, Josh, and Reggie were to tackle a deal, we could be like, yeah, we're together on every deal, and this is a question we're ready to answer. But if we were to, let's say, syndicate with a group out of, I don't know, let's make up a town, we'll call it Austin, Texas, with some operator that may not be the most experienced, this may be the one like, no, we've not done a deal with this guy, but we've heard he's good stuff. And so that's one of the things you might need to be prepared to really back up the credibility of the other people that you're working with. And if not, you might find yourself in Hurt Locker. All right, next one. What contingency plans are there in place if one or more partners decide to leave the team? Believe it or not, you can divorce your partners, and you need to be prepared for the question of what happens if Josh decides that he's had it and he's done, and Josh walks away. How do Reggie and I continue to limp along without him? And so just be prepared to kind of answer those questions, because this is something that these are, especially when you're talking about the perpetuity model, these long-term investments that we're dealing with ours. People are thinking long-term, so they're thinking, hey, what happens if so-and-so dies? What happens if so-and-so decides to leave? How does that look? Next question: have the principals ever been convicted of a financial crime, felony, or securities violation? We throw this in there, not jokingly, we throw this in there because this is a question you will receive, and it's an honest question that you should be prepared to answer. And hopefully the answer is no, but also this may be, again, one of those questions that you're dragging down the list, and you might be like, you know what? I didn't actually fact check this random partner that I'm about to commit millions of dollars to with my investors' money. Maybe I should do a quick background check. Maybe I should ask him the question like, hey, dude, I know this is off the wall, but have you been committed to a crime, or is the SEC looking you up right now? It's one more way to kind of back you up and think about that. All right, how does the team handle key person risk, meaning key principal risk, and do they have a succession plan in place? Again, succession plan meaning, what if the key principal dies, or what if there's some major plan? How is that going to affect the loan? How's it going to affect the financial stability of the deal? And just going to be prepared to answer the questions pertaining to the key players in the game. That's potentially even outside of the operating GPs, because sometimes you'll have the operating GPs, but then a key principal outside of that who's mainly just the money driver. He's just there to guarantee the loan. All right, how many members does the team have, and what are their respective roles? We've been in deals where man, there's like, you don't even know how many GPs are in it. And it's like, honestly, it gets sloppy. And you're like, how there's 16 GPs? Wait, no, that's 16 groups. And there's like 45 GPs that are actually in this deal. And it gets a little complicated. And so the more complicated it gets, doesn't necessarily mean it's better. Sometimes there's a group mentality, a group think that happens. And these are the type of things that some investors want to understand. Do people actually know what's going on in this deal, or are they just kind of jumping on the bandwagon and it's now just kind of a group think mentality? Before we go to the next slide, Josh or Reggie, anything you want to add to any of these questions?
I was just gonna say that the Austin, Texas thing sounded vaguely familiar.
Yeah. That's a real world example right there.
That's
Reggie, any
also
work you
the
wanna add?
example of how many GPs are, there's too many GPs in the deal.
Yeah, there's too many for sure.
I think the only comment I had, Matt, was on the question that you put up there, not jokingly. A lot of times, like, I mean, if you have a securities violation, you
Yeah.
probably aren't allowed to raise any money under an SEC sanctioned, capital raise event. And then if you have a felony or a financial crime on your record, that might come up if they're going to be on the loan guarantee. So think about it. You're like, 15 days out from closing, all your earnest money is hard, 50K, 100K. Boom, the bank comes back and says, sorry, we can't loan to you because one of the guarantors has a history. And so that could be a bad scenario.
Absolutely. Before we jump to the next slide, any questions on these ones, guys?
Well, hey, Matt, are we going to dive into some of those more in detail? You said at the end, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, if any quick questions you have now, but at the end, I would just note any specific questions you want to dive into deeper on 100. We will 100% dive into any of these deeply. This is more of a surface level review, but if you have any quick questions on any of these now, I'm happy to answer them. If there's any confusing or just outright at all.
Well, no, I was just actually wondering, like, if you're on your own as a GP and let's say, you pass away, or what happens basically. I was curious.
That's going to be all written up in the PPM and your operating agreement as an entity. And so that's something your attorney is going to talk you through of like, hey, what will happen? And ultimately, you can really do whatever you want. If you're the sole GP, you have the authority to dictate whatever happens to that. And so you could say, hey, I'm going to gift it to somebody, or hey, whoever invested the most as an LP will now become the GP. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do, especially as a single sponsor. When it becomes a group sponsor mentality, obviously it becomes a little more obvious at that point, right? Let's say there's 3 GPs, and one of them dies, the responsibility generally just will be expanded to the current GPs. But sometimes you'll have a carve out there to where if a GP dies, that is your chance to maybe pull another person into the mix to really fill the role and responsibility as an outside investor who's not currently in the mix.
Okay, makes sense.
Cool. All right, continuing with team structures and capabilities. What is the professional background of the management team, and how does it relate to their current role in the firm? This is one you will get quite a bit. People want to know what your background is. Have you been doing this forever, or is this your first time? And we'll get to experience as an entirely different section, basically, because experience is a big part. But having a background that's not real estate is not a bad thing. So I want everyone to realize that. It just will show kind of what your background is. I mean, as a military pilot, people generally look to me as, all right, someone who's like honest and trustworthy. I've been entrusted to drop nuclear bombs, so I'm probably good to entrust with somebody's money, right? And if someone looks at Reggie as a prior engineer, they're like, okay, like he's clearly like detail-oriented person. So having a background isn't a bad thing. I would just say leverage whatever background you can. Be prepared to answer this question, but be prepared to just take whatever positives you can with your current background or the other GP that's in there and really leverage that. Whether it's, hey, this is I've not had much of a background. I've been working at Walmart my whole life, and my entire life I am fully dedicated to real estate. This is my passion. This is my dream. I'm excited to really make this in my own. So like that's not a bad thing either. So just figure out what is the silver lining with your experience level and your experience prior to real estate, and work that into the question and the answer. All right, what are the core values of the team, and how do they align with the investment strategy? This is something we talk about quite a bit. Our goal is financial freedom and time independence for ourselves, but really our goal is generational wealth that we can create for ourselves and for our friends and family. We say for our friends and family because we generally are doing 506B syndication. So those are the people that are investing with us, the people that we know, the people who are in our current sphere. And so that aligns with our core values. And when we say that, they can see those things that align. So just, again, be prepared to, classic, have a vision for what you're trying to grow, not just, hey, I'm trying to make money right now so I can get this acquisition fee. Like, nope, that's not going to really drive a bunch of confidence in your investors, right? So have a plan, have a goal in mind, a long-term vision there. All right, what are your unique skills, or what unique skills or experiences do the team members bring to the table? This is kind of driving off of the professional background. But again, this is one more question that you can kind of, as a reminder of like, oh yeah, I forgot, like Josh has a podcast, not necessarily his professional background, but we can leverage his podcast to bring on a guest that might teach us something. Like we've actually pulled a lot from Josh's podcast, from the various things that he's learned, whether it be, rubs, kind of water reductions type of stuff, or just various 1031 connections, or whatever it happens to be. There's always just some random nugget that Josh has pulled from his podcast that has really helped us out, or connection that he's made. And so that's not necessarily his professional background, but it's a skill or experience, that a unique thing to Josh that really we can leverage as our team. All right, what are the key skills and attributes that they believe make their team successful in their chosen strategy? So this is your sales pitch, basically. This is kind of culminating everything as a team, being prepared to package it up when somebody asks you like, hey, why should I invest in you? Why is your team unique and good? And let's just be prepared to answer that one. All right, does the team composition remain consistent on different deals, or does it fluctuate? Again, this kind of alludes to the previous question, but even within the team, are people doing different jobs in different deals? So for instance, is Reggie always the asset manager? And in our current portfolio, the answer is kind of yes. But if we were to land a deal down in Tampa, where Josh and I are boots in the ground, you better believe those roles and responsibilities would shift. And so we would let them know, like, hey, internally, yeah. And all these other deals, Reggie is the asset boots in the ground right now because he's the one who lives over there. But for this deal that we're tackling right now in Tampa, yeah, Josh is going to tackle the asset management, and he's super excited to be the boots in the ground. So a little bit of a different question, but just understand the nuances there and be prepared to answer that. All right, who is responsible for signing the loan guarantee or carve-out guarantee? What qualifications and experience do they bring to this role? Again, be prepared to answer questions on the key principle if there is one. And this is going to talk about, are you as a general partner guaranteeing the loan as well as a key principle? So a lot of people are going to want to know how much, what's the word I'm looking for? How much risk do you personally have in this deal? You'll commonly get the question of how much money are you personally investing in this deal? It's a question you get all the time. But this question is alluding to the fact of like, hey, there's more than just monetary value you can provide to the deal. One, obviously, you brought the deal together as a general partner. That's in and of itself worthy of you being there. However, people generally want to see like, what else are you offering? What else are you bringing to the table? What other risk are you bringing? And one of those risks commonly, especially in the bridge debt that we commonly engage in, the kind of the value add proposition that we take, are we accept a relatively high amount of loan guarantee as general partners in order to make these deals work up until we refinance. And hopefully after the refinance, we're refinancing into non-recourse debt. And then we've kind of been able to pull away a little bit. All right. How's the team's profit structured relative to investor returns? Are there any performance-based incentives in place? So people will straight up ask you, like, how much are you getting paid and how, right? And we're going to get into fees and stuff here a little more specifically, but this is kind of alluding to that. What's in place here? Like, what are your motivations? Are we truly aligned between investor and general partner? Like how are these differentiated here? And so they just want to know, like, at what point do you get paid? How does it work? So typically this is going to be a breakdown conversation of understanding how a preferred return works. And so if someone asks me this, I'll say, all right, well, the first, let's say you invest $100,000 and we have $12,000 that we can disperse based on distributable income. Here's how a pref would work. The first 7% goes to you and the remaining we split, or the remaining goes into this extra fund. Depending on how your structure is set up, you would kind of talk them through, how the money flows and how they get paid versus how you get paid. They're going to want to know that. All right, how's the team identify and manage potential conflicts of interest? So if there's an internal debate between me, Josh, and Reggie, who wins? Do we go to do we hit the wrestling mat and do we just figure out who's the strongest amongst us? Is that how we determine who wins an argument? Or is it a vote? Or, that is a question they're going to know, especially again, you're thinking long-term here. Conflicts of interest will occur. And that's well, I guess it's really more internal conflicts. If there are conflicts of interest, meaning, let me think, like family, for instance, like we've hired Reggie's brother before as a maintenance worker in one of our apartment complex. Now, is that a conflict of interest to bring family into a deal? And how do we acknowledge that amongst the GP group? And what we did for that one, we would use that as an example if that was a question. I'd be, hey, we just brought it up to the entire GP group. We talked about the other opportunities we had out there as far as potential employees, and we came to, we chose Reggie's brother because of X, Y, and Z. And so we'd come at a more of an objective approach as much as possible. Cool. Any questions on any of these, or Reggie, Josh, any fill-ins you want to throw in, guys?
Oh, not on this one.
I have a question. It kind of goes back into one of the questions that was on the last slide, but at the same time. So let's just say, and this is an example that was brought on to the podcast, having I think it's called a key person life insurance policy. If we have, let's say there's 2-3 people on our team, and we say, oh, we have a key life member policy on all 3 of these key members. So that way we can find somebody that's going to be able to be employed and do you share that? I mean, obviously you just kind of give a highlight to the investors, right? Like we have key policies, insurance policies or what have you.
That would be a sales pitch for sure. Honestly, if someone wanted to know like what would happen, and that's even more important to Oliver's point. The less people you have in the deal, the more valuable those people are, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, I would definitely include that as a sales pitch, and I wouldn't necessarily put that in an investor pitch deck. But if someone asked me, I would 100% be very happy to be like, yeah, if Josh dies, we got $5 million on his head, and that's going to go towards the deal to fund the salary of another person for the next 20 years. And that's the reason that we have this investment fund or this insurance fund for specifically for Josh, because he's so vital to us.
Okay, right on. Thanks.
Do you guys really have that? Am I unaware of this?
Well, you'll find out one day if you die. Reggie and I.
Well, I won't find out. Y'all will find out. I'll never know.
You have to sign off on it, Josh, anytime somebody gets a policy on you.
Josh signs whatever we send him, Paul.
You sign this.
Yeah. Sweet. All right. Next, like I alluded to earlier, so we talked about the team structure and kind of that whole aspect, but then the one thing we're definitely going to hit home on is specific questions about your track record as a team, as an individual, and then experience. This is the big section for sure. So how long have the principals been investing in real estate, more specifically in the type of real estate that's being considered for syndication? Now, again, it's not bad to say, like Reggie, when he jumped in, I've been investing in single family for a while. I amassed this portfolio. I ended up selling it as a commercial asset, but this is my very first syndication. That's totally okay to say. The last thing I would ever, for all of these questions, you never want to lie, but you definitely want to figure out the most positive way to answer these questions. So think about you individually. Like if you have any real estate experience, I think that is a positive thing. If you have any commercial experience, it's even more positive. If you have very specific syndication experience as a sponsor, that's the most positive, right? But figure out when you can, your current experience level, and figure out how you might be able to spin that to be as positive as possible. All right, how many properties has the team acquired? Pretty straightforward answer. We have acquired X amount of properties. If the team is involved in the multifamily business, how many units have they acquired? How many do they currently own? So that's a question you will get quite often, is how many have you acquired, but how many do you still own? Like, oh, we've acquired 10,000, but we currently own 5 units. You're like, oh, why? Or maybe because our business model is to flip them and we never hold on to anything. Or if we were to say our business model for the past 10 years has been to buy and hold for generational wealth. And we say, hey, we bought 10,000 units over the past 5 years and we now own 200. They're like, okay, well, what you're saying doesn't really align with what you're doing, right? So this is kind of their fact check of that. All right, if the team is involved in the commercial property business, how many square feet have they handled? So this is more like if you're dealing with industrial, they're going to want to know on the other side, how many hotel rooms, self-storage units, whatever you're going for, how many RV pads, mobile home pads, just be prepared to answer that question. These are more blatant black and white type of questions. How long has the team been operating in the current geographical market? It's good to know how experienced you are, But let's say you've done a lot of deals in the southeast region of, you know, Mobile and Montgomery, but all of a sudden you do a deal in Austin. You might not be as well versed in, let's say, the eviction laws in Austin that might bite you in the ass. So just be prepared for that, right? And so not being specifically geographically experienced in a certain area could be a detriment. So just be prepared to answer that. And if you could say, hey, no, we've not done that, but you know, the partner that we have involved, he lives there, he knows there, he already has multifamily. So we're really relying on him as local knowledge and local experience.
Exactly what I was going to say, Matt. It's almost like it still hurts, you know.
Yeah. How many units have they owned and managed in this market? And again, specifically in the market, they want to know. Yeah, wait, we've operated in this market before, but specifically, how many units have you run in this specific market, and where hyper locally are we dealing with? Has the team weathered previous adverse market cycles? How did they handle it, and what was the outcome? So this is the type of thing we can talk through. Market cycles isn't necessarily, we've talked big picture market cycles, and when people ask the market cycle question, they really mean just experiences in general. Like you could talk about, you know, large insurance events, or you can talk about you know, interest rate hikes, cap rate variation. You can talk through any sort of, you know, murders in your building, whatever it happens to be. Like, what large events have you dealt with, and how were they handled? Like, did you truly delegate to your team the way they should have handled it, or did you you know, flail and flounder, and did you make an excuse for poor returns? All right, sorry, I didn't ask for any final question. Any final questions or cleanup for this slide, guys? Sweet. All right. How long have they been executing syndications? So specifically, you know, we talked about geographical, we talked about niches, but specifically syndication. How long have you been doing it? What's your experience level there? How much capital have you raised today? If you are a syndicator and you say you've raised $50 million, how did you do it? Like, did you actually raise 50 million, or is that just people telling you they'd be willing to invest with you? How much did you actually raise? How many deals have you actually closed? Like, these are obviously black and white questions, but be prepared to answer these things. And it seems trivial at first, as you might be a newer investor. You're like, dude, I've obviously closed one deal, or like, I've obviously closed 3 deals, or I've obviously closed no deals. But as you start to grow your portfolio to closing, you know, like the past 2 deals as an agent, I've closed, you know, 250 deals the past 2 years as a real estate agent. As an investor, honestly, I'm not even prepared to answer this question because I don't even know how many. So like, you do start to lose track, and it's a good problem to have. But as a professional, you should be prepared as you go through a new cycle of like raising money and talking to investors. Be prepared to be like, what sounds better to you? If someone would be like, oh yeah, we've closed somewhere, I don't know, between 7 to 9 deals. We have like, I don't know, like 700 units or so. Or someone would be like, yeah, we've closed 9 deals. We've exited 3 of them. We have 769 doors, and we're opening up another 20 doors next week. You know, someone who's very specific, knows the number. That's the person I'm gonna be more confident with. So again, this is just to refresh your numbers and get ready to answer these questions. All right, how have their previous deals performed? How does this performance compare with their initial projections? This is one you get quite often. Can you show me your pitch deck from a previous deal, and then show me your final email to your investor? How did that work for a deal that went full cycle? Did you promise them a 20% IRR? In the end, you offered them nothing? That was my very first syndication as an LP. I gave him $50,000 from my IRA, and I got back $50,000 3.5 years later. 0% return over 3.5 years. I was ecstatic. I was ecstatic because I was just happy to get my money back. You know what I mean? Like, I was literally happy just to get 0% because I just wanted to be pulled out of that damn deal. And so that's the type of thing you want to be prepared to, you know, answer that question. I knew promises are easy, but what does your actual execution look like? All right. Why did any underperforming deals not meet expectations? What were the lessons learned, and what strategies were changed in response? So again, it's not bad to talk about your downsides, to talk about the things that have gone wrong. The biggest thing I will say here is take ownership. If you start blaming others and making excuses, that's going to shine pretty poorly on you. But you know, I think we talked about one of my friends who she had a deal. I think, I can't remember what it was. They bought it like 92%, 92% occupancy. Is a 300 unit or so property, and then 6 months into the deal, they were at 27% occupancy. Something crazy. Like, so like 200 people left this apartment complex, like a massive exodus. It wasn't even an exodus. They found out the property manager was kicking people out illegally. And so terrible deal. So when she goes there, what she ended up doing, she said, oh, well, we realized they had a mistake. We had to fire a general partner. We went there in person. I lived at the property for a year. She lived there for an entire year, turned it around, and they're operating now. They have like 97% occupancy, and they're doing really well. So if you were to talk about that, hey, we had an underperforming asset. We weren't able to offer any sort of returns for 2 years, but this is what I did. I went out there and moved to the property. I made it change with my own sweat equity. I cleaned toilets myself, and I did what I had to do in order to get this up and running. You think that's going to look good to an investor? 100%. They're going to love stories like that. But just, again, underperforming is not necessarily a bad thing. Just be prepared to shine a good light on it. All right. How many investments have gone full cycle, bought, managed, and sold? How did those perform relative to the original projections? Kind of similar to the previous one. The previous one, as far as performance, you could talk real time. This is like, okay, truly, how many have gone full cycle? For us, this is one we kind of, we'll talk to a couple of the deals we've gone full cycle, but we let people know, like, our goal isn't to go full cycle. I don't want to get your money back to you to have to deal with taxes and capital gains and depreciation recapture. Our goal is to maintain a partnership for a long time. However, the couple of deals that we have gone full cycle, here's how they performed. All right, what does your current portfolio look like? How many units, in which locations, what type of properties? Is it similar to the way what you're planning on buying now? So again, you know, they're going to want to know, are you in an area, in the asset class? Is everything similar to what you've done before? If not, it's okay. Just want to know what type of risk level I'm entering in as an investor. All right, any cleanup or anything for this one, Josh or Reggie?
I have a question.
Yeah, go Paul.
So I'm building out my website now, and you know, I've had a few single family rentals. Should I put those on there and say previous, you know, acquired, rented, sold, or because I'm doing syndication now, should I just go and leave those out?
You'll be split on this topic. I'll be honest. Some people are going to tell you one way, or some people tell you another. I am personally of the mindset of putting as much experience as you can down. I think it just shows a broader breadth of experience. It doesn't correlate as a one-to-one. You know, if you owned 100 single families and now you're about to buy a single 100 unit multifamily, that doesn't mean you have the same experience, right? But it does mean you have a broad experience of at least the real estate in general. And so I'm a fan of promoting as much as you can. Yeah. But I'll open up to Josh and Reggie to see what they think.
Yeah, I mean, if you just go to our website, I did the fourplex, and the fourplex is on my website, and then we did that single family flip, and we put that as experience on there, and it was like syndication, but it's still single family. Yeah, I mean, just anything that we've ever had the chance to actually do relevant to any level of like a real estate investing experience is definitely something that I felt, I don't know if I say confident, but wanted everyone to know so that maybe they could feel confident.
Yeah.
In my ability to perform.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Paul, in my opinion, single family, there's plenty of analogies there for multifamily. It's like Matt said, it's not one-to-one, but it's very relevant. So
yeah, because I mean, I had tenants, you know, they don't all stay 4 years. I had multiple tenants, and it's like just 2 properties or 3 properties. So okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you can do to bolster it. Now, if you get to the point where you have 2, 3, 4 syndications in your belt and you want to take that down, sure. But even then, it just, whatever, experience is good. in my mind.
For diversification. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
All right, investment track record, continue with experience. Have they executed similar investments in the past? How many, in which locations? Again, similar question, but we're throwing these down there because you're going to hear the different wordings and kind of minor nuances between, but effectively the same. So be prepared to answer that same question. Does the team specialize in a specific strategy, location, or product type? So again, this is when you talk about the team, you can talk about your history, but your goals and your values, and this will kind of align with that, hopefully, with what your specialization is. Have they ever had to make an unplanned capital call, and why? This is always a tough question. What strategy were employed to remedy the situation before issuing an unplanned capital call? And so this is one of those ones that investors will ask you, hey man, have you ever done a cap call? What happened? How did it go? Did you dilute their investors' funds? Like, what did you do? Did you do everything you damn well could have to prevent that capital call from occurring? Because capital calls, if you guys don't remember what that is, that's when you're asking investors for more money after the syndication has closed, because you are low on working capital and you need to keep the deal afloat. Ideally, you pick good general partners to where if something does go awry, the general partners are able to float float the bad day. You're able to effectively initiate a general partner loan to the deal and not affect the limited partners at all. But sometimes there are opportunities where, you know, we've had one capital call amongst us, and it's not fun. It's not a fun conversation to have with any of your investors at all. And there's plenty of, and a lot of these mistakes I'm alluding to are all one bad deal that we got into. All I have to say is just be prepared to answer that question. And if your answer is no, that's great. So like, hey man, no, I've never had to do a capital call. I've also never done a syndication, but that means I've never done a cap call. So that's okay. All right. Could they share an example of their worst deal and what strategies they use to overcome the challenges? This is one where I'll often even bring deals that we didn't close intentionally. And so like the Phoenix is a good deal that I like to reference with this one. People are like, you know, like, what are some of your worst deals? But honestly, one deal that we were loving, but turned out to be one of the worst deals was the Phoenix out in Louisiana. Yeah, and I tell them the whole story of like, hey man, we were doing due diligence. We thought it was great. We went out there, everything looked good until we realized like, wow, this is about to be a really crappy deal. I just tell them the whole story. But there's a silver lining on the backside where say, luckily, we ended up not even raising for that one. We bit the bullet for the $20,000 or $30,000 in due diligence. We lost, but we also didn't lose any investors' money because we chose to not even continue with the deal. And so people like to hear that, like, hey, you're willing to back away from deals that you think are bad. That's what people like to hear. All right. Have they worked with the same core team on prior deals, and does the team fluctuate? Kind of answered this one already. This is really, again, to the experience level. We got kind of already answered that one. Can the team provide a brief overview of each principal's investment experience? Again, same thing individually now, break me down of what people's experience are. Can they provide some examples of the deals they've exited and the returns they've achieved? Kind of talk to that. We're just gonna have a couple of duplicates here, so I apologize. These are 100 questions, but I guess there's some duplicates. Can they share examples of adversity they faced in prior investments, how they responded to it? Again, we were talking about unplanned capital calls and things like that. Adversity, again, could be some of those bigger things. You know, our 148 unit in Mobile, I feel like we've dealt with every adversity. We've dealt with, let me think, hurricanes, shootings, fires, floods, firing property managers, being inappropriately billed. What else? What other calamities have we dealt with on that one?
Political attacks.
Political attacks, yeah. Being sued by the mayor of the city.
Lawsuit.
On the news. Yeah, I mean, we've dealt with everything. And so it's specific examples that are good to show. And you're going to be asked that. All right, next one. How do they source their acquisitions? What is your planned? Oh, sorry, we're transitioning now to investment strategy and risk management. Sorry, so that was experience and everything. So now we're focusing on your strategy and your risk mitigation. All right, so how do you source your acquisitions? That'll be a question you will get asked sometimes. Hey, how'd you find this deal? You know, there's no insider trading in real estate, which is kind of unique, right? In Paul's world in the financial industry, if there's insider trading, that's a really big deal, right? It's not, you're not okay to know about a merger or an acquisition that's about to happen, then you're like behind the scenes trading stocks, right? But in real estate, oddly enough, it's completely legal, right? To like, hey man, I'm about to do this. Sweet, let's do this. You know, like that's oddly enough, it's fine. So how do you source deals? Just be open with how you're sourcing the deals, and deals are going to come in all sorts, all forms and fashions. What is the process for analyzing potential investments, and what are their criteria for investment selection? And so just talk through what we've talked through in the analyzing, kind of say, hey, here's what we do. You know, Josh is the optimist, Reggie's the realist, and I'm the pessimist. And we kind of go through this iteration cycle, and this is how we get there. And what are your criteria? We try to make the perpetuity model fit. And so like we talk through the specific, like what are the green light, red light criteria that we must meet in order for us to find a deal. And the deal that we alluded to that we were analyzing last week, I mean, Josh, Reggie, and I, we had a Zoom meeting after that meeting, and we sat down. We're like, hey guys, how do we feel about this? It's not hitting the perpetuity model. It's not hitting that one green light that we really need to hit. And we chose to go back to the seller and say, hey man, it's not working. Sorry. If you want this to work, here's what we need to fix. And so we'll talk about that more on Thursday, like I said, but we're trying to renegotiate real time to see if we can make something happen. All right. How do they handle due diligence for their investments? Again, just talking through what is your planned due diligence. If this is part of a pitch deck, you've probably already done your due diligence, so you can kind of talk through what you did real time. But if you're just talking in general to an investor, we talk through, hey, we generally hire a professional company. They're out of Houston and they do a great job, right? And they fly out, they do everything here as far as due diligence. Kind of walk them through what you do for due diligence. All right, what is the approach to diversification across the property types and geographic regions? It might be a good thing to say, hey, all of our properties are on, oh man, I'm totally blanking on the street name. What's that street in New Orleans? The popular street?
Bourbon.
Bourbon Street. Yeah, it might be like, hey man, we specialize in properties on Bourbon Street. We own 90% of Bourbon Street. We have a $10 million or $100 million worth of assets on Bourbon Street, which sounds good from an operational standpoint, right? But from like a risk mitigation standpoint, do you think owning all of your portfolio on Bourbon Street in New Orleans is a good idea? Probably not, right? Let's say like from a risk mitigation standpoint, it's not bad to have a diverse, asset class amongst your portfolios. And it shows that you, if something goes wrong with your property, hopefully your other properties are going well, that you can kind of supplement as needed as a general partner. All right, how do they approach market analysis and site selection for new acquisitions? We've gone over market analysis in depth, so you guys understand how you can answer that question. And site selection for new acquisitions as well. Kind of just, it's all part of the whole market acquisition stuff and market analysis that we've been discussing with you guys. Who is responsible for managing properties? Is this done by a third-party company or in-house? This is going to be a big question. Who's managing the property itself? Self-management is becoming more and more popular as the market continues to tighten. And as fewer and fewer property managers show that they can actually manage properties. It's been very easy for property managers to manage, just like it's been easy to buy good deals across the board in real estate 2 years ago. The same thing held true for property managers, right? Rents were going up and everyone was happy. And so a lot of property managers got into the mix and a lot of them are being weeded out right now. We know specifically one property manager that we recently fired. They're hemorrhaging clients right now. They're getting fired left and right. And so it's just good to know who's managing the properties and like, what's the plan there. All right, what is their renovation budget based on contractor bid, or is there renovation budget based on contractor bids, past experience, or estimates? So like, again, talking to how are we mitigating the risk if there is a large CapEx project? Like, what is it based on? Are we just doing this past experience? Like, hey, we've done this before. It's $3,000 a door. Or have you gotten specific bids to bid out every unit, or is this a generalized bid across the board? And sorry, any questions or feedback on those ones, guys?
I was just going to give a story, I guess. We haven't really talked about insurance yet. I feel like it's probably this next upcoming slide, but I actually just did a podcast interview today with a guy. And if I'm being honest, this was the first time that I've ever heard of anyone. And I mean, I guess I knew it happens. It's bound to happen somewhere out there, but I've never like talked to a passive investor that this happened to. He lost all his money in an investment that he did as an LP with a sponsor. Like, not only did he not make any money, it's all gone. And it all happened in like a 12-month time frame. Like, it happened pretty quick. So they closed on the deal. They closed on it. It is pretty recently. So maybe, I don't know, 15, 16 months ago. And they had to do, literally within like less than a 12-month time frame, they had to do a capital call. Like, he invested $100,000 initially. And then for whatever reason, they hadn't like properly estimated CapEx. They hadn't properly estimated something, and more capital was just needed to get the property to a more stabilized position to where they could execute on said refi. And a lot of that also can't stem from the fact that they did bridge debt, and there's been a lot of inflation and everything that's gone on with bridge debt. Like, it's just bad timing all around. They closed on the deal close to around the time frame when interest rates were starting to go crazy, which maybe that was longer than a year. But anyway, so the debt market was terrible. They had to do a capital call. He had to infuse another $10,000. So he invested a total of $110,000, lost it all. And the reason that he lost it all was because then later down the road, they actually, towards the end of the time frame in which the deal was basically dead, there was a fire. There was a terrible fire at the property and burned down literally the whole asset. It wasn't a huge property. He said it was like 25 or 30 units, but burned the whole place to the ground. And then the insurance coverage that they had at the property wasn't sufficient to cover the entire like replacement cost. Because a lot of people usually they try to get, cost to replace, or replacement cost is recommended, but a lot of people are trying to save money on insurance right now because they think they don't need it. What's the odds that the whole property will burn down? And they're very slim odds, but nonetheless, this happened to these people. And they had $2 million payout. There was. And the total cost to actually rebuild was like 2.8. And so because the bank is in, first position to actually get paid, when the insurance company paid out the claim, they paid it directly to the bank. The bank actually took the money and said, I'm not giving you any of this money until you can tell me that you'll get the other 800,000 required to rebuild this property that, I basically own. And so then they went back to their investors for a second capital call. They were unable to do so because all the investors were like, no, you already made us do one capital call. I, at this point, don't want to reinvest. And they were trying to go to other like private equity firms, and they were trying to go to other investors, and they were going to dilute. And then they themselves as GPs weren't liquid enough for an $800,000. So when it was all said and done, the bank kept the money. And matter of fact, they just kept the property. So they just literally gave the property back to the bank, and every investor in that deal and all the GPs lost all their money because they made many risk mitigation, risk management mistakes.
Yep. It's
That's
the
my
real
story.
thing, guys. All right, continuing with investment strategy and risk mitigation. Is there a provision in the budget for contingencies during renovation? Good segue to Josh's story there. What contingency planning do you have in place, and why? The way I like to think about this is a concept called pathways thinking. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but pathways thinking is effectively how many pathways do you have from a starting point to ending point? Like, sure, you might have the A to B kind of connection, which is obvious, but what other alternate routes do we have to get to the same end goal? And so this is just all about contingency planning there. What is the current market capitalization rate for similar properties in the acquisition area? So are we dealing with some investors who are getting savvier and savvier, or just savvy investors in general? They're going to want to have a discussion about cap rate and what your implications are, because they're going to have a pretty good pulse on the market in general about what is an average cap rate for multifamily. And it might be way different than, like, say you have an investor who invests in Miami. You might be like, man, it's a 4 cap. That's a great cap rate. Where, in Mobile, you get like a 4 cap. You're like, there's no way in hell I'm playing a 4 cap in Mobile for a multifamily. So you might have to have that discussion, understanding there's different markets that drive different cap rates. They're gonna want to know that discussion. So be prepared for that. All right, what is the projected exit cap rate for the sale of the asset? How is that determined? So what are you doing? Are you adding buffer for, let's say you're trying to exit this deal in 3 years, in 5 years? Like, how conservative are you being? And that's the whole discussion of that. What Reggie and I will often do, we'll create some sort of a sensitivity analysis where we'll say, all right, here's where we're running our numbers. Like, we're buying this at a 6.5 cap. We're going to run this as if we're exiting at a 7 cap. So we're being conservative. We're going to add a 0.5% of cap rate there, but then we'll run a sensitivity analysis. All right, here's what it looks like at a 6.5, a 7, a 7.5, or an 8 cap. Here's what our returns look like at these different cap rates on the exit. So we'll kind of run those different scenarios, and we'll show the investors. Even if we go to a 7.5 cap, you're still looking good for your returns, and here's why. All right. Is the income used for calculating the forecasted exit price adjusted for the next buyer's property taxes? And we could say insurance or any other kind of thing that we're alluding to. I mean, we literally had this discussion earlier today of insurance and taxes affect the value of a property, right? And so are you planning on, when you're running your numbers on your planned exit strategy, what are your assumptions on that sale? Or what is your operating expense ratio that you're running there? That's why I'll commonly want to see at least 50% operating expense ratio, just because it's just generally the way it goes, on these different deals, just depending on the class of your asset. But yeah. What is the plan if there is an adverse market cycle when it comes to sell? What are you going to do if market drops? What's your plan? Do you have to sell? Are you putting yourself into a square corner? Let's say your plan is to sell at year 5 and there's a 5-year balloon. Maybe that's not the smartest thing. So you asking yourself this question will kind of hopefully derive different contingencies that you can plan for. Does the operating agreement have provisions that allow for an extended holding period if the original sale timing isn't optimal? Kind of the same question, like, are we able to extend, but it's a more direct way of asking it. Are the projected returns gross or net of fees? This is one you actually get. You will see people who don't incorporate fees into the various returns. So capital transaction fee, is that actually incorporated there? Or sometimes people say, hey, this this property produces 20% IRR, like in general, 20% IRR, but they're not incorporating any of your fees, asset management fees, acquisition fees, anything. So that's a valid question. Any cleanup on this one, guys?
No, it's good.
All right, what are the terms of the loan? Are there any prepayment penalties? Prepayment penalties is a big thing in the commercial space, and we'll talk more about that as if we want to deep dive into lending and loans. But pre-penalties, and there are some prepayment penalties that are not too bad. You know, typical 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kind of prepayment model. Or are you paying what's it called? Yield maintenance. Yield maintenance, you can severely screw yourself if if you're dealing with yield maintenance and not understanding the risk involved with yield maintenance. All right, how do they approach risk management, and what strategies do they use to mitigate risk? And again, this is more of a broad level from a strategy perspective. What is your thought process with risk mitigation? If this question were to be asked to the investors that Josh was just alluding to that general partners, I would love to hear their response before they started the deal. Hey, how do you guys approach like risk management? Like what are you doing to mitigate risk? Imagine asking those investors up front. I'd be curious to see if their answer would have satisfied you to give them $100 grand or not. How would you handle a scenario where you only had to raise where they only raise half of the needed capital? So what happens if you only raise half the money and it's enough to close? I think that's the next question. So there are scenarios, right? Oftentimes you'll have like, hey, we're raising $3 million, but cash to close is $2 million. So we've raised $2 million and we get across the finish line and you still only have $2 million. So we're basically out of money. Like, what do we do? What's your plan there? Is the GP prepared to throw down another $1 million to cover you down? Are you going to cancel right at closing? Yeah, Paul said you're going to make it rain. Like, what's your plan? Be prepared. What happens to the money already raised if a deal's canceled? This is a more generic question, but be prepared. Like, are you guys recouping any fees prior to closing? Most sponsors will not get repaid until closing, but some sponsors will take repayment right away as the money's raised. It's up to them on how they want to run the money, but it's a good question. Say, hey, what if this deal falls through? Do I get my money back? Is that it? Pretty clean. Is there a risk of loss if the investment if the fundraising cannot be completed? Same question, but again, be prepared to answer these kind of similar questions. Who absorbs the cost of due diligence and other unrecoverable expenses if the deal fails to close? Again, same thing. Are you recouping your funds up front? Or is this your risk as a GP? How is the underwriting process structured and what assumptions do they use when projecting returns? A lot of this will come down to assumptions because when you're dealing with your like pitch deck specifically, some investors, and I hope you guys are jumping on as many pitch decks as possible. Like if you hear of any opportunity to jump on and just listen to investors pitch their deals, I highly, highly recommend just jumping on. You're going to learn a lot about things you like, and you write down notes of, hey, I really liked how they said this, or I liked how they had them there. You're you're going to write down a lot of things you don't like either. Like, what assumptions are here? Are they assuming? I don't even know who their property manager is. Like, what are their fee assumptions here? Just kind of going through your baseline assumptions that you may not spell out specifically in your pitch deck, or this may remind you like, hey, you know what? Going through my pitch deck, I didn't actually put down my assumptions. And so like throwing down your assumptions helps to understand what's going on. Any questions on this?
How do you handle some of those questions? Like if somebody asked you all, what do you do if you only raise half? Do you just say, oh, we're going to convert it to make it a 506B, a C?
It's going to be deal specific. And so let's say, so like our RV park would be a good example because we ran into this recently. So for our RV park, what we did, we wanted to try the 506B to 506C conversion. So we told everyone, all right, guys, 506B for the next week or whatever. After this, we're going to close the opportunity. We're reopening it up as a 506C, knowing that was going to, like, we've never done the 506C before. So like we may have raised all the money right away, or we may be floundering. And so it happened. And we had some questions like, what happens if you don't? And we said, well, luckily with this deal, right now we're planning on paving all the roads and making all the pads concrete. We have the ability to save a couple $100 grand by just going gravel roads or gravel roads and gravel paths or whatever it happens to be. And so we had kind of some plans of like, we can take this off here. We won't install a pickleball court. We'll just have, as an open field instead. And so we'll have like the alternate plan to do. In the multifamily space, it may be the same thing. Like, hey, we plan on turning all of these units with this big CapEx budget. But if we don't have it, our plan is to turn these first 10 that we can get the most return on, and then we're going to flow the next. We're going to fund the remaining CapEx plan through the cash flow of the property. That may be your plan, but maybe your plan is like, hey man, this is a stabilized asset. If we don't get enough money, we're just going to have to cancel the deal, and that's just the way it goes. And I'm sorry, I don't want to put you in a position where I can't support the returns that I'm promising you. So I'm going to do everything I can to raise the money.
And then at that point, let's say that was a scenario, you turn your client investor money back then to capital. The GPs just have to swallow it, right?
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Yep.
Yeah, I heard something on another podcast earlier, driving home, and the way she structured hers, because somebody was asking the same question. She said, yeah, what we did was we said, okay, for the first 5, what they made is a package. Like, oh, okay, if you want a lighting upgrade, the rents are going to be a $50 month raise. If you want kitchen and lighting, and then for the first 10 apartments that became available, they just went completely kitchen remodel, counters, that wood floors or whatever, and that was like, that one jumped like $150 a rent. So I thought that was really interesting too, because then you can, like you said, you have your options. Like, okay, if we're not going to spend this full $1 million because we can't get a cool capital raise, we'll have an option B underwriting deal and say, okay, we only did 500,000 because we might be short.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, if you have the ability to make it a more of a modular kind of improvement, for sure you can work with an underraised fund. But sometimes the answer is, hey, worst case scenario, I got Uncle Billy, who's one of the general partners with us in this one. He's got 10 million liquid. He'll just fund the rest if we need to. He's our last minute decision. He doesn't want to, but he will. And so that may be the answer as well.
So keep your options open.
Yeah. And the other option could be, hey, I open up to Paul. Paul gives me his friends, and I dilute my equity as a GP in order to raise the remaining money as well. So you have a lot of different options.
That's good. Okay.
Little side story. I read something about a guy who screwed up during the escrow, wiring all so he had raised like $1 million from his investors, and he wired the funds to escrow, and the escrow was a scam. He got scammed basically. And so he worked for the next 10 years. He basically worked for free to try to reimburse his investors. That was impressive. So we got to be careful with the fraud with escrow companies.
Wire fraud is 100% a thing. I will tell you, I'm incredibly terrified of it. Anytime I'm wiring to a bank that I don't know, I always call to verify, and I will try to get at least 2, sometimes 3 different data points to making sure I'm sending the money to the right place, because it is terrifying. And I think he's doing the right thing of responding to do everything he can, even if it takes 10 years to return his investors' money back. He's doing that. And I love that he's doing that, versus what sounds like Josh's story with that investor. He said, "Oh, sorry, man, lost your 110 grand. Peace out. See ya." Like, that dude hopefully never tries to raise money again, because I would do everything I can to make sure he doesn't, because he's clearly not a worthy operator. But yeah, no. And even one of my mentors early on, his own grandmother got scammed. I mean, she sent $50,000 to the wrong place. Classic. I think we had talked about this earlier, where it's one of the strategies for scam artists right now is to call older people and just say, "Grandma or Grandpa, I need your help." And when they come back, "Oliver?" And you're like, "Yeah, this is Oliver. I just got pulled over. They think I had drugs on me, but I need you to send $50,000 so I can go clear my name." And all of a sudden, your grandma's like thinking it's you because she gave up your name right away, right? And so it's a pretty common strategy right now. Scary stuff, man. Especially with AI and the way you can modulate voices and take people's voices and make it even more convincing.
I actually read it. It happened to Richard Branson. He got scammed.
Oh, really?
You can probably find that online or in his book. I don't remember where I read it, but apparently he actually wired $1 million to a friend. He thought like a friend of his called him and he said, "Hey man, I have big problems. I need $1 million." And he actually wired the funds, and it was a scam. So pretty high profile scamming, and I'm sure you can find that somewhere online.
Oh yeah. I mean, Paul, were you trying to show us something?
Yeah, it was something I shared with my team today. This was from the Wall Street Journal from the weekend. It was on the review section. It says, "Why we get scammed and what to do about it." And it's It,
Yeah.
it talks about that stuff. It's
Oh,
how
yeah.
to protect yourself. And then I think we talked about it as well. I think from that link that Josh had sent they basically was saying, how to lock your credit and all that other good stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a thing. I mean, one last side story on that. Even my own grandmother, like 3 months ago, whenever it was, she was here. Someone called her saying they were her bank and that they were going to freeze all of her assets if she didn't go to Target and pick up a couple $100 worth of Target gift cards and then send the gift cards to wherever. And my sister-in-law was with her and she's like, "Grandma, this is clearly a scam." But she had my grandma so convinced. My grandma forced my sister-in-law to drive her to Target, picked up the gift cards, was at the checkout, literally buying hundreds of dollars of gift cards with my sister-in-law, be like, "Grandma, stop doing this. This is clearly a scam." It had to take the manager of Target came down and was like, "Ma'am, do not do this." Like, it was like crazy how convinced they have it. They can do it. It's very, very convincing. All right. Anyways, we digress. Let's jump into here, and then we're trying to get faster and funnier here to finish through these 100. All right. How do they source their debt? Big question is, what is your relationship with your lenders? Predatory lending is a thing in the multifamily space. You think you're secure because you're going to some bank that's going to give you $4 million, $10 million, $20 million, and they're going to be 100% legitimate. Not always the case. There are lenders out there, specifically bridge lenders, that are actively looking to take deals from people. So they're looking for any opportunity they can for you to underwrite the deal, you take down the deal, and then all of a sudden they foreclose on you, and now they have a deal with an extra 30% equity that they can just go ahead and run and operate. Go ahead, Oliver.
Hey, Matt, no, I just want to build on that because it's super important. This actually happened to a friend of mine. And so he was foreclosed on. He lost a deal exactly like that. Predatory bridge lender, super scary. The guy apparently is actually going to jail. Like, luckily it happened to many clients, and I guess he got arrested, or he's going to get arrested or something. But yeah, my friend lost the deal because of that.
Yep.
No.
It's a thing. And one of the questions you can ask if you're dealing with lenders you've not dealt with before is, do you guys operate any properties yourself? And that's a valid question to ask a lender. And if they're like, "Oh yeah, we have a portfolio of 10,000 units," you're like, "Oh, that's pretty high for a lender. Why? Did you have some big operator you had to foreclose on, or have you been operating these for a while?" And so just I'm not saying every lender out there is out to get you, but just be aware that there are some bad actors even in the big lending space. All right. Can they explain their lending relationships? How many loans have they done with the current lenders? How long have they been working with these lenders? Again, it's all kind of trying to give as much confidence you can that these lenders are out on your side and not trying to work against you. What is their relationship with the local regulators, and how are they handle compliance with regional and national regulations? This is one of the reasons I love working with Reggie in the Southeast, because Reggie's either dated somebody or knows somebody, or his family was somebody. And you rub elbows with anyone from Mobile to Montgomery to Gulfport, Reggie knows them in some form or fashion. It's like, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's like 1 degree of Reggie Ross in the Southeast. And so having that local connection with people who have roots in the area does help a lot. It really, really does. What relationship do you have with local real estate agents, brokers? Valid question, and that really helps bolster your knowledge in the local area. How do they maintain relationships with investors and manage their investor relations? So it's going to be like, hey, what type of investor portals do you have? What type of updates are you planning on giving me? How is that going to happen? What networks do they leverage to gain access to off-market deals? Again, this kind of goes back to what relations do you have? What is your deal sourcing technique? How does that happen? How do they build and maintain relationships with potential sellers or partners? Again, same thing as you talking through once I get a deal, like was it this morning, Reggie, or yesterday when you were talking to the seller for the 90 in Pensacola? Like we do as much as we can, even if there's a broker involved, we try to talk directly to the seller. And that's one of the strategies we teach, and we tell people, like, yeah, it's great to talk to a broker, but everyone's played the telephone game before. I might tell Oliver, there's a big red bus outside, but if we play a telephone game, by the time it gets to Michael Maxey or Brian or Ethan Max, next thing you know, we're talking about, some red UFO that's in the middle of outer space. So, how are you, just discuss what your tactics are for maintaining those relationships. Any questions on relationships and sourcing, guys? Cool. What professional relationships do they have that bring added value to the investment strategies? This is something that Paul could, relate to. Hey, I'm a financial advisor, so I really understand numbers. I'm good at crunching numbers. So you have a professional background that really lends to attributes of a deal that aren't necessarily real estate. This kind of goes back to our very first question of experience, but specifically to this deal, like how can you come bring your deal to the table? Or like the one deal we bought where we were taking over with an insurance problem, an insurance claim. Our attorney, our go-to attorney, Kenneth, his specialization is insurance, like insurance claims. And so it's like leveraging the fact that that's his specialization as an attorney really helped us in that deal. All right, how are they viewed by their peers in the market? Can they provide references? References mean a ton. It's one thing to be like, my name's Roar and I'm awesome, right? You should trust me. Versus if I were to say, hey, go talk to Paul. Paul will tell you I'm a good dude, and he has a conversation with Paul, and Paul's like, man, like, yeah, he's a good dude. He does what he says he's gonna do, yada yada. You guys understand the power of secondary references is huge. How do they stay informed about the market trends and changes in the industry? So how involved are you with the market? Do you actually have a pulse in the market? So the more you can talk about, well, Dublin over here, that closed at this much a door. This other one that closed over here, this much a door. And we're asking this much. And we know, like, if you can talk specific properties, and especially if you can throw out specific names, like I know Steven, the broker, he closed this one, Jason closed this one, Justin closed this one. You could kind of talk to specific things. It just helps to your kind of credibility there. What is their approach to competition in their chosen markets and sectors? So what are we going to do with competition? So specifically talking, like our one in Montgomery, our 88 unit up there, there's a direct competitor that's not even a mile up the street, right? Very, very similar area, similar size and everything. So what are we doing to differentiate ourselves, or how are we actively competing with this other property? What relationships do you have with contractors and other necessary service providers for the property maintenance? So again, it's all a relationship question. How do they manage relationships with tenants? What's your plan? Like one of our properties, and we try to institute as many as we can, do you throw, a Christmas party? Do you throw, a 4th of July party? It doesn't cost much to throw a $100-200 worth of, hot dogs and hamburgers and throw a table out there and have your property manager run something. But that means a lot to your tenants. So are they tenants, like Josh alluded to, I think last week we were talking, are they tenants or are they residents? Like what is the relationship we're trying to build here? We're trying to build long-term residents who stay there for a long time. I mean, Brixton Place, people have been there for what, 30, 35 years, 45 years? Some people have like brown carpet that they haven't complained about, and this like nasty ass brown carpet from like the 1960s. And you're like, all right, man, as long as you're happy, I'm happy. Like whatever you need, I'm here for you. All right. What steps do you take to build relationships and network within the region geographic area? Again, like, what are you doing to actively involved? It's pretty obvious if you're like Josh, who's running a podcast and staying actively involved. But then we could talk to more, hey, like Reggie rubs elbows all the time, and he's helping us out from the regional and local perspective there. All right, communication and transparency. Who performs accounting function? It's a big one. Who's running the numbers? Because I want to know. And what's their experience there? Could they provide details about their accounting experience? Yep, there you go. Could they share sample quarterly reports? Oftentimes before they invest you, they want to see what type of products you're producing for your investors. And so if you've not done it before, say, hey, we don't have any, we can offer you, but here's what we're planning on offering. But if you have previous reports, this should be relatively easy to pull. How frequently do they report and distribute returns, right? You might be reporting monthly, but distributing quarterly. And so just making sure you understand what is that cadence of communication as well as money flow. And if that's planning on changing, when are you planning on changing it? Do they have an online investor portal for sharing information? I've talked to that already. When do they typically deliver K1s to their investors? I tell you right now, this is always a headache. So just tell your investors up front, K1s are always an issue in every syndication. So we'll do our best to not force you to do an extension, which I think is the next one. But it is a very real possibility. You may have to extend your tax filing date. So I apologize in advance if that is the case, but we will do everything in our power to try to get your K1s on time. And the earliest we will get those to you, maybe, is end of March, maybe. Yeah. And they might ask questions about why, and we can talk about that as not getting too in the weeds there, but just realize K1s are often delayed.
We still have a deal that we are waiting on K1s for.
Our investors have gotten all of the K1s. We as GPs are still waiting for K1s for 2022. So just realizing that's for two deals at this point. I think we have all the other ones at this point, but 2 more deals we're waiting on. All right, communication transparency. How often do they report to the investors and what information these reports contain? So again, we talked about how often reporting, but this is more specific. Like, what do your reports look like? What products are you providing? Is it just a video? Is it just an email? Is it you texting me as well? Like, what type of updates are we getting? If the investment is a fund, so if you have a fund that's investing in you, do the reports include like property level reports or just fund level reports? Like what level of reporting are you doing? Are you talking about specific unit numbers that are being turned? Like, hey, unit 121 finally turned. Like your investors probably don't care about specific units. They probably care more about returns as far as a property. So it's gonna be a balance of figuring out how much information you give them versus not, you know what I mean? Like, and investors are gonna want to hear different things as well, but you'll find a happy medium. Do your reports show a comparison of the originally projected performance versus actual performance? I love when we do this, right? I love taking, here's what we planned, here's where we are, or here's what we budgeted for this year, and here's what we are. It's really good to show a baseline versus where you are. Whether you're outperforming or underperforming, it's just really confident. It builds confidence, especially for investors that aren't as savvy. When you say, hey man, we're at 85% occupancy, people who don't know this space are like, cool, man. Like, is that good? Is that bad? What does that mean? You know, it's like, hey, our plan was to be at 80% occupancy, but hey, man, we're ahead of schedule. We're at 85% occupancy right now. Versus like, oh man, that's great. You know, so at least they have some comparison in them. All right, are the reports compared against current budget? Again, sorry about performance and now budget, basically the same thing. What are their protocols for transparency and addressing investor concerns and queries? So if I have a question, do I have full disclosure of the books, or is there certain things I'm not allowed to see? Like, what is my access as an investor? And if I have concerns, who do I ask and ask questions to? What is their communication style and frequency with investors? Again, we kind of alluded this with reports. And then do they have a protocol in place for disclosing bad news or unexpected hurdles? What is your plan? If you have to drop a bomb on me right now, like are you going to come to my house and sit me down before you tell me I lose 100 grand? Or is this something you just send me a text and say, sorry, bro, 100 grand gone? Like, what does this look like? Any questions on any of those guys? I think we got one more slide. All right, I got some. All right, financial structure and returns. What's the structure for a loan guarantor or carve-out guarantee? For instance, some deals you're gonna have 100% guarantor, where like you as a GP are guaranteeing 100% of loan. Sometimes you're guaranteeing 25% of loan. Sometimes it's non-recourse, and there's no guarantee there. Are the forecasted returns gross or net of fees? Man, we already included that one. Sorry. What are the terms of the loan? Are there any prepayment penalties? Oh, that one. Let me see here. Oh, waterfall structure. I was trying to get to. What is the waterfall structure? So if there is a waterfall structure, just be prepared to answer it as succinctly as possible. We talked about this last week. I think it was last week when capital raising. You want to be able to clearly define how your returns work. Specifically, if it's a waterfall, if there's a multiple level waterfall, it gets a little convoluted. All right, how's the asset management fee calculated? What's it based off of? If you do have that fee, what does that mean? Are all fees accounted for in the financial projections? Again, we'll make sure that's actually included, where some people don't. Are there any fees that aren't shown in the marketing or underwriting? You will get this question. So even if you don't have a capital transaction fee, they might be like, hey, dude, in your pitch deck, do you have a capital transaction fee? Or I didn't see an acquisition fee in your slides. Do you have an acquisition fee? And so just they want to look for any hidden fees. You might be in the PPM, but aren't on the actual slide deck. So just be aware people are going to ask you that. What is the target IRR and how is it calculated? You don't need to talk about specifically the formula for IRR, but you're going to reference the IRR, I'm sure. But that's going to be a common question you get. What are the provisions of the case of unplanned capital call? Kind of talked about already. Looks like for some reason, copy and paste must have jacked up here. All right. Anyways, how are the distributions made to investors? Are they made periodically upon the exit? Again, what is the flow of money? How often do they expect to get paid? How is the sponsor's compensation structured? Talked about already. What is the financial recourse if the property does not meet projected performance? Are you guys going to pay me my money if it doesn't perform? Are you going to cover, as a GP, you're going to cover the pref in the meantime if it doesn't perform? These are questions you might get. How are the investment risks spread? And again, so if it's a portfolio, is it spread? This is kind of, we were talking to your own personal portfolio before, specifically for this investment deal. How are the risks mitigated there? All right. I said 100 questions, went through them. Some were duplicates, so I owe you a couple fresh questions, but that's it, guys. Try to get there in time with 60 seconds to spare, but we're going to stay as much as we need to for questions, guys. Whew. Fast and furious, but hopefully that gave you a good idea, a broad understanding of, all right, before I engage in this investor discussion, like creating my investor pitch deck, if you can kind of have these list of questions to kind of read, Like, okay, cool. I forgot to touch base with that. Like, be prepared with these things. So I hope you guys found value in kind of going over these different questions. What questions do you have specifically?
Oh, the man.
Paul,
So-
go for it.
So I have a question that I didn't see on there. I'm sure some clients have probably asked, can I list a beneficiary on my partnership ownership? And how do you address that?
You could do like a joint. What is it called? It's not tenants in common. It's like a joint.
Joint with rights of survivorship?
Yeah, that's it. Joint tenant with rights of survivorship. It's really long. But yeah,
Okay.
they can sign that in the PPM as that. And then both them and whoever they want to be their joint tenant will sign.
Oh, okay, beautiful. So the attorney puts that in there, so that way they can, okay, beautiful. That's how I was wondering. I was like, how does that happen? What happens then?
What else?
Yes. So on the flip side, if someone else dies, how do they get their money?
Right, yeah, exactly. So how is that? So do I call the attorney and say, okay, attorney, take care of this?
It'll
That's
probably
gonna be a
still
part
go
of
to
the-
the.
Go,
Yeah,
Josh.
it'll probably still go to the same bank account that it was gonna go to beforehand, because probably what'll end up happening is the bank account they set up initially will be one they both have access to. Because they're now signing as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship or however. And so it probably won't even necessarily need to be anyone that you'll call. They might actually be the one coming to call you to tell you that so-and-so's passed away, because otherwise, how are you gonna know?
Right.
Yeah, if someone dies, it's gonna basically go through the traditional probate process as needed. You'll be contacted by the probate attorney, and they'll basically determine that between you and your SEC attorney. You'll determine kind of the path forward from there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because we've had a few clients that have passed away recently, and I have to freeze the accounts to make
Yep.
sure it doesn't trade anymore and all that other good stuff. So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I'm sure that'd be step one before while they're mitigating probate and figuring out what's going on.
Right on.
Oliver, what you got?
Have you guys ever had an investor who wanted out, like before the refi? You know, what if someone say, "Hey, I want to get out"? How do you address that?
We've not dealt with that personally yet. How I would deal with it is every one of our PPMs is going to be written a little bit differently, right? So you're really going to just reference the PPM for how shares can be transferred. Typically, again, depending on how it's written, you can either have it to where those shares can be bought through first right of refusal to current LP. So the current LP can say, we make an announcement to LP saying, hey guys, Oliver's trying to exit the deal because of X, Y, and Z. His 50 shares are up for grabs. Would anyone like his additional 50 shares at X price? We'd have to figure out a fair market price for that. And so there are some complications there that you'd have to deal with. If not, then there's ways in every PPM that you can sell your shares or pass your shares along, but it is a complicated process. I don't know, Josh or Reggie, any additional thing you want to pass on that?
Yeah, sometimes in the PPM, I think it's one of those boilerplate statements, but it basically alludes to the fact that after you close, nobody can sell any shares for a pre-designated amount of time. It could be a year. I think it's usually a year. So there is that to consider. But if you're looking at like later on down the road, somebody comes at hard times and they come to you, it's really just looking at, like Matt said, looking at the paperwork and seeing what the OM or the OA suggests. But we actually had, well, he didn't want out of the deal, but he wanted into our next deal. And he had some money tied up in another deal that was about to close. And so we worked out something. It was basically, I lent him the money. And so when that other deal closed, I just took a portion of his profits to cover what I loaned to him to invest in that next deal. So point is, you can get creative. Just reference the operating agreement first and ask the attorney what's the best way to document it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully there's not a mass extinction event for your investors and you don't have to deal with it all at once. Hopefully it's like a one-off thing that you can kind of handle, and manage the fire there. If you have 4 of them that die at once, just plan on being a full-time job for probably a month or 2 while you're trying to sort it out.
And then I would assume, like, if we're holding long term, once the investors have all their money back, there's probably no reason why someone would get out at that point, right?
I've had people ask me that, hey, in this perpetuity model, what if I want out of the deal? I'm like, under what scenario would you want to be out of a perpetuity model deal after your money's been returned? Like literally you're a limited partner, so there's a zero liability.
Yeah, I basically tell them that they're not in the deal. I'm like, there's nothing else that I could give you. You have.
I'm like, if you want to get out of the deal, I will gladly take your shares. I don't know, like we would have to just come up with a provision that's it. I mean, these are all contractual things, right? So everything can be changed. It's a contract. You can write it however you want. You can amend them however you want. So we could say, hey, we'll come up with a fair market price, and Josh, Reggie, and I will buy your shares from you gladly. There, you know, whatever it happens to be. Yeah, luckily, that is a question I've been asked, and I was just like, really? Like, but why?
You know what you're asking me.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how much you guys remember Luke, but Luke used to work for a company called S Token, which they were trying to kryptonize syndications, basically. It
Yeah.
was literally a platform based on people being able to get in and syndicate put all their syndications on a platform. It's called S Token because they were quantifying everything as a legitimate token. And then your token was basically like a share of that investment. And then they were trying to be able to quantify it and turn it into something like a stock market exchange where you can then trade your shares in syndications through cryptocurrency. They never actually got it off the ground. I don't know if they're still trying to get it off the ground. They've been trying to do it for over 3-4 years now.
There's a bunch of companies trying to do that. I haven't seen it successfully executed really well yet.
Yeah, I just had a lot of questions like fair market value, what he's saying. How do you give a fair market value, without having, I don't know.
Yep, you're gonna have to update it on a somewhat regular basis. It's not gonna be like the stock market where it's updated instantly, right? It's gonna be quarterly. It's gonna be way too much. Like maybe biannually, where you get some sort of a fair market appraisal out there, but then you're having fees to pay appraisals to get some sort of fair market opinion of value. I don't know.
It's just
I've
like
yet to
converting
find
it
it, yeah.
over into a REIT, sounds like.
It was weird. But that
Yeah,
was,
I mean, sort of, where REIT's gonna be more of a publicly traded entity on the market, where this is more of an individualized property that you just own a share via a token of a property. But again, what is the
Yes.
value of that token?
weird.
That's the problem.
All I had to say, that was them trying to create the ability for syndications to become a liquid investment and for people to be able to get in and out of things as easily as you can in something like the stock market. But like I said, it hasn't taken off because it's just too many complications.
Yeah. Anyway, if you want to get into crypto, just go and buy some Dogecoin and just hodl, right? Just hodl. I don't know. I'm not into crypto. What else, guys and gals?
Hey, Matt.
What's up, Leo?
Hey, speaking of one of your earlier points, you mentioned to watch as many sort of investor pitches as you can.
Yes.
Do you guys have any that's like uploaded somewhere that we could take a look at?
I'm sure Josh can get some uploaded if he doesn't already.
Yes.
Sounds like he doesn't, but we will. That's a good do it. I will shoot Josh a message on Slack right now so he can get some uploaded as a reminder.
Awesome. Thanks.
Even better, I'll just send you guys a link to what we have on YouTube.
Can you throw that on Slack? Can you throw that on Slack too, Josh? Do they have it there?
That makes life easy for everybody. You said Slack?
No, just throw it on Slack so everyone can get it. Yeah.
Here's our RV resort webinar that we did right here.
That was a good webinar.
You had a chance to watch it, so I did post it somewhere.
It was on the investor portal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's on the Ferrari Investor Portal or the 3 Beach. But that's a good question, Leo. I mean, you'll see the way we do it, and honestly, every time I watch another investor's thing, I either kind of cringe a little bit, or I'm like, oh, that's a cool little nugget, and I try to steal it. I say steal meaning there's nothing new under the sun for the most part here. It's all R&D, rip off and duplicate, man.
Nice. That's fair.
What else?
Hey guys, other question. So as far as building on other people's reputation, so of course we have you guys. What to what extent can we use your reputation in your company? Like, can we just like say it, or can we actually add you guys in a pitch deck saying like, here, those guys are my mentors, or to what extent can we use you guys, I guess?
Dude, I see so many people use their mentors in their pitch deck. I see them use them in their websites. I see them use them in their PPMs, and like they're not even a part of the deal. I'm like, it's a legally binding contract. So I don't know if I'll go to the extent of the PPM, but in terms of marketing and branding, I would use this just about anywhere that you can use this. And then if someone has a specific question like, hey, how come this person's never on the call? How come this, how come that? Then you can dive deeper into it. But more often than not, people aren't really going to ask. At least what I've seen in the past anyway. Just
I think the biggest thing
generalizing
there
it.
is, yeah, leverage the names, leverage the experience of, but make it clear too. Like if we're gonna be, joint venturing with you, for sure, like we are partners with you through and through. Otherwise, I think you said it exactly right. Hey, part of so-and-so mastermind with Josh Ferrari, multi-millionaire creative capital, professional. Everyone knows Josh. He's famous, right? And where throw any of our names out there, but make it clear. I don't want you to falsely advertise by saying, we're in the deal with you, but leverage our name as much as you can to help you out for sure.
Cool.
Nice. Thank you.
My pleasure, guys.
All
Well,
right,
Thursday, what's the plan for Thursday again?
next section of underwriting,
I think
deep detailed advanced underwriting.
I think we finished the 90 unit. Anything specific you guys want us to cover in the underwriting piece while we depart? We finished the 90. We're going to give you the update for where we stand on the 90 unit, which will be late breaking as of Thursday, I'm sure. But anything else, if not, we'll rack our brains together and make sure we come up with something for you.
Right on.
Okay. All right. Got any ideas? Shoot us a message on Slack. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Later, everybody.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.